McCord. I decided, since I can't be with you in school right now because of the pandemic that's going on, that I would sit in my house and finish reading one of our favorite books that we were reading, The City of Ember. Remember our City of Ember? So, I'm going to go ahead and start with the first chapter, though. You don't have to listen to the first few chapters if you don't want to, but I figured it had been about a month since we had read and gotten together and done this together. So I thought we'd start at the very beginning to kind of get used to it and kind of remember where we were. I think we were on like maybe chapter 8. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, so I've got my little friend behind me. There's Paco. He's asleep. And I don't know how to show you Sugar down here in my lap. There's Sugar. So the littles that I adopted are with us, and they're going to listen too. Okay? All right, so this first chapter, remember, is called The Instructions. So it's not really chapter 1, it's just called The Instructions. Kind of gets us started. Okay? Okie dokie, artichokes. Okay. Well, I'm learning this, remember? Okie dokie, artichokes. Apparently, Miss McCord didn't learn this too well. This is kind of like what goes on in our real classroom, isn't it? When I get confused and I can't get my page back to where I want it to go. Okay, well, whatever. Here we go. I'm not going to start over because this is taking me a long time to figure out. All right, here we go. The City of Ember by Jean Dupre. And by the way, boys and girls, Miss Lumpkin sent Jean Dupre an email asking if we could finish reading this together. And she said, of course, by all means, do that. So that was pretty cool, wasn't it? Okay, the instructions. When the City of Ember was just built and not yet inhabited, the chief builder and the assistant builder, both of them weary, sat down to speak of the future. They must not leave the city for at least 200 years, said the chief builder, or perhaps 220. Is that long enough? Asked his assistant. It should be. We can't know for sure. And when the time comes, said the assistant, how will they know what to do? We'll provide them with instructions, of course, the chief builder replied. But who will keep the instructions? Who can we trust to keep them safe and secret all that time? The mayor of the city will keep the instructions, said the chief builder. We'll put them in a box with a timed lock set to open on the proper date. And will we tell the mayor what's in the box? The assistant asked. No, just that it's information they won't need and must not see until the box opens of its own accord. Now, accord, if it opens on its own accord, that means it opens on its own. So the first mayor will pass the box to the next mayor, and that one to the next, and so on down through the years, all of them keeping it a secret all that time? Well, what else can we do? Asked the chief builder. Nothing about this endeavor is certain. There may be no one left in the city by then, or no safe place for them to come back to. And when it said nothing about this endeavor is certain, what do you think an endeavor means? Right, this undertaking, this big thing we're trying to accomplish. So the first mayor of Ember was given the box, told to guard it carefully, and solemnly sworn to secrecy. When she grew old, she, the first mayor, was a woman, and her time as mayor was up, she explained about the box to her successor. And who would her successor be? The person after her, who also kept the secret carefully, as did the next mayor. Things went as planned for many years, but the 7th mayor of Ember was less honorable than the ones who had come before him, and more desperate. He was ill. He had the coughing sickness that was common in the city then, and he thought the box might hold a secret that would save his life. He took it from its hiding place in the basement of the gathering hall and brought it home with him, where he attacked it with a hammer. But his strength was failing by then. All he managed to do was dent the lid a little. And before he could return the box to its official hiding place or tell his successor about it, he died. And the box ended up at the back of a closet, shoved behind some old bags and bundles. There it sat, unnoticed, year after year, until its time arrived, and the lock quietly clicked open. Chapter 1, Assignment Day. In the City of Ember, the sky was always dark. The only light came from great flood lamps mounted on the buildings and at the tops of poles in the middle of the larger squares. When the lights were on, they cast a yellowish glow over the streets. People walking by threw long shadows that shortened and then stretched out again. When the lights were off, as they were between 9 at night and 6 in the morning, the city was so dark that people might as well have been wearing blindfolds. Sometimes darkness fell in the middle of the day. The City of Ember was old, and everything in it, including the power lines, was in need of repair. So now and then the lights would flicker and go out. These were terrible moments for the people of Ember. As they came to a halt in the middle of the street or stood stock still in their houses, afraid to move in the utter blackness, they were reminded of something they preferred not to think about, that someday the lights of the city might go out and never come back on. But most of the time life proceeded as it always had. Grown people did their work, and younger people, until they reached the age of 12, went to school. On the last day of their final year, that's when they were 12, which was called Assignment Day, they were given jobs to do. The graduating students occupied room 8 of the Ember School. On Assignment Day of the year 241, this classroom, usually noisy first thing in the morning, like ours used to be, was completely silent. All 24 students sat upright and still at the desks they had grown too big for. They were waiting. The desks were arranged in 4 rows of 6. 4 rows of 6. So how many total desks? 24. One behind the other. In the last row sat a slender girl named Lena Mayfleet. Slender, tall and thin. She was winding a strand of her long dark hair around her finger, winding and unwinding it again and again. Sometimes she plucked at a thread on her ragged cape, or bent over to pull on her socks, which were loose and tended to slide down around her ankles. One of her feet tapped the floor softly. Okay, now you got a couple of clues in that paragraph that things were old. First, that she pulled on her loose socks. And then did you hear how she described the coat? What was it? Ragged. So everything was old. And how do you know that she was a little bit nervous? She tapped her foot softly. That's Arthur's craft. The author could have said Lena was nervous, but she didn't. She said one of her feet tapped the floor softly. Second main character, here he comes. In the second row was a boy named Dune Harrow. He sat with his shoulders hunched, his eyes squeezed shut in concentration, and his hands tightly clasped together. Now, the author didn't say he was nervous either, but the author told you his eyes were squeezed shut in concentration, his hands were clasped, and his shoulders were hunched. So he's also nervous. His hair looked rumpled, as if he hadn't combed it for a while. He had dark, thick eyebrows, which made him look serious at the best of times. And when he was anxious or angry, two adjectives describing him, his eyebrows came together to form a straight line across his forehead. His brown corduroy jacket was so old that its ridges had flattened out. And corduroy is a type of material that has little bumps in it. And so when you wear it a lot, it's like rubbing on it a lot, those little bumps become kind of slick and soft and kind of flattened and mashed out. Once again, everything in Ember is old. Both the girl and the boy were making urgent wishes. Dune's wish was very specific. He repeated it over and over again, his lips moving slightly as if he could make it come true by saying it 1,000 times. Lena was making her wish in pictures rather than in words. In her mind's eye, she saw herself running through the streets of the city in a red jacket. She made this picture as bright and real as she could. Lena looked up and gazed around the schoolroom. She said a silent goodbye to everything that had been familiar for so long. Goodbye to the map of the City of Ember in its scarred wooden frame, and the cabinet whose shelves held the Book of Numbers, the Book of Letters, and the Book of the City of Ember. Goodbye to the cabinet drawers labeled new paper, old paper. Goodbye to the 3 electric lights in the ceiling that seemed always, no matter where you sat, to cast the shadow of your head over the page you were writing on. And goodbye to their teacher, Miss Thorne, who had finished her last day of school speech, wishing them luck in the lives they were about to begin. Now, having run out of things to say, she was standing at her desk with her frayed shawl clasped around her shoulders. And still the mayor, the guest of honor, had not arrived. Someone's foot scraped back and forth on the floor. Miss Thorne sighed. Then the door rattled open, and the mayor walked in. He looked annoyed, as though they were the ones who were late. "Welcome, Mayor Cole," said Miss Thorne. She held out her hand to him. The mayor made his mouth into a smile. "Miss Thorne," he said, enfolding her hand, shaking her hand. "Greetings! Another year." The mayor was a vast, heavy man. Oh, I see we've got Honey visiting us now. A vast, heavy man, so big in the middle that his arms looked small and dangling, kind of like a T-Rex looks, don't you think? I think that's what a T-Rex looks like, honey. In one hand, he held a little cloth bag. He lumbered to the front of the room and faced the students. His gray, drooping face appeared to be made of something stiffer than ordinary skin. It rarely moved except for making the smile that was on it now. Okay, boys and girls, look at that word lumbered. That's Arthur's craft. Arthur didn't say he walked to the front of the room. But when he said lumbered, how does that help you visualize what the mayor looked like? Right, he was big. He just kind of lumbered, kind of awkward, moving his big body. What else lets you know that he was unhealthy? Gray, droopy face, stiffer than ordinary skin. Okay, all those are clues. It didn't just say the author walked to the front of the room. He was big. His face was gray. Okay, that wouldn't be interesting. But our author, Jean Dupre, made it come alive. We visualized this big, unhealthy man walking to the front of the room. Now, you're going to find out later why he was so big and why his skin was gray. It's because he's not an honest person and he's doing something in the city that's wrong. "Young people of the highest class," the mayor began. He stopped and scanned the room for several minutes. His eyes seemed to look from far back inside his head. He nodded slowly. Assignment day now, isn't it? Yes, first we get our education. Then we serve our city. Again, his eyes moved back and forth along the rows of students, and again he nodded, as if someone had confirmed what he had said. He put the little bag on Miss Thorne's desk and rested his hand on it. What will that service be, eh? Perhaps you're wondering. He did his smile again, and his heavy cheeks folded like drapes. Folded like drapes. What kind of figurative language? You got it. Simile. Lena's hands were cold. She wrapped her cape around her and pressed her hands between her knees. Please hurry, Mr. Mayor, she said silently. Please just let us choose and get it over with. Dune, in his mind, was saying the same thing, only he didn't say please. Can you see? That's a clue right there, too, about these two kids' personalities. That's Arthur's craft, okay? Lena is nervous. Please, please, please just let this get over with, okay? Dune's nervous, too, but it said he was saying the same thing, only he didn't say please. Okay, remember that later on because that's going to lead you to understand about Dune's personality. He's going to be kind of a hot-headed kind of person. Hot-headed. What kind of figurative language is that? Yep, an idiom. Okay, his head is not hot. That just means he loses his temper quickly. Something to remember, the mayor said, holding up one finger. The job you draw today is for 3 years. Then, evaluation. Are you good at your job? Fine. You may keep it. Are you unsatisfactory? Is there a greater need elsewhere? You will be reassigned. It is extremely important, he said, jabbing his finger at the class, for all work of Ember to be done, to be properly done. He picked up the bag and pulled open the drawstring. So, let us begin. Simple procedure. Come up one at a time, reach into this bag, take one slip of paper, read it aloud. He smiled and nodded. The flesh under his skin bulged in and out. Who cares to be first? No one moved. Lena stared down at the top of her desk. There was a long silence. Then Lizzie Biscoe, one of Lena's best friends, sprang to her feet. I'd like to be first, she said in her breathless high voice. Good. Walk forward. Lizzie went to stand before the mayor. Because of her orange hair, she looked like a bright spark next to him. Because of her orange hair, she looked like a bright spark to him. What kind of figurative language? Simile. Now choose. The mayor held out the bag with one hand and put the other behind his back, as if to show he would not interfere. Lizzie reached into the bag and withdrew a tightly folded square of paper. She unfolded it carefully. Lena couldn't see the look on Lizzie's face, but she could hear the disappointment in her voice as she read out loud, Supply Depot Clerk. Very good, said the mayor. A vital job. Vital is very important. Lizzie trudged back to her desk. Arthur's craft. Trudged. It didn't say Lizzie walked back to her desk, but if you trudge, it's something holding you back, like you trudge through water, you trudge through mud. Okay, now she didn't have mud or water, but when she trudged back to her desk, that means she just slowly, like she's pulling her feet because she's sad. She didn't want Supply Depot Clerk. Lena smiled at her, but Lizzie made a sour face. Supply Depot Clerk wasn't a bad job, but it was a dull one. The Supply Depot Clerk sat behind a long counter, took orders from the storekeepers of Ember, and sent the carriers down to bring up what was wanted from the vast network of storerooms beneath Ember streets. The storerooms held supplies of every kind: canned food, clothes, furniture, blankets, light bulbs, medicine, pots and pans, reams of paper, soap, more light bulbs. Everything the people of Ember could possibly need. The clerks sat at their ledger books all day, recording the orders that came in and the goods that went out. Lizzie didn't like to sit still. She would have been better suited to something else, Lena thought. Messenger, maybe. The job Lena wanted for herself. Messengers ran through the city all day, going everywhere, seeing everything. Next, said the mayor. This time 2 people stood up at once, Orley Gordon and Chet Nome. Orley quickly sat down again, and Chet approached the mayor. Choose, young man, the mayor said. Chet chose. He unfolded his scrap of paper. Electrician's helper, he read, and his wide face broke into a smile. Lena heard someone take a quick breath. She looked over to see Doone pressing a hand against his mouth. You never knew each year exactly which jobs would be offered. Some years there were several good jobs, like greenhouse helper, timekeeper's assistant, or messenger, and no bad jobs at all. Other years, jobs like pipeworks laborer, trash sifter, and mold scraper were mixed in. But there would always be at least 1 or 2 jobs for electrician's helper. Fixing the electricity was the most important job in Ember, and more people worked at it than anything else. Orley Gordon was next. She got the job of building repair assistant, which was a good job for Orley. She was a strong girl and liked hard work. Vindy Chance was made a greenhouse helper. She gave Lena a big grin as she went back to her seat. She'll get to work with Clary, Lena thought. Lucky. So far, no one had picked a really bad job. Perhaps this time there would be no bad jobs at all. The idea gave her courage. Besides, she had reached the point where the suspense was giving her a stomachache. So as Vindy sat down, even before the mayor could say, "Next," she stood up and stepped forward. The little bag was made of faded green material, gathered at the top with a black string. Lena hesitated a moment, then put her hand inside and fingered the bits of paper. Feeling as if she were stepping off a high building, she picked one. She unfolded it. The words were written in black ink and small, careful printing. Pipeworks laborer, they said. She stared at them. Out loud, please, the mayor said. Pipeworks laborer, Lena said in a choked whisper. Louder, said the mayor. Pipeworks laborer, Lena said again, her voice loud and cracked. There was a sigh of sympathy from the class. Keeping her eyes on the floor, Lena went back to her desk and sat down. Pipeworks laborers worked below the storerooms in the deep labyrinth of tunnels that contained Ember's water and sewer pipes. Now remember, Ember is this city that is below the earth. Okay, it's below ground level. Something has happened in the world, okay, that's going to destroy the world. And the builders created this city underground to last for 200 years. After 200 years, this container that contained the instructions out was supposed to open on its own accord, remember? And the people of Ember were supposed to leave. Okay, well, this box, remember, by the 7th mayor, got banged on and thrown in the closet. Okay, so remember it said it's been about 240 years now, but nobody keeps the exact record. So it could be 236, 245, but it's been about 40 years more than those 200. So see, they're out of everything. The generator that's down here below the ground is barely working. So when she pulled Pipeworks, if Ember is already below the earth so far down that it's black, it's totally black without light, Then they're down farther than that when you go into pipe works. So that's not a job that many people would want. All right. So when she got it, she's terribly disappointed. Okay. They spent their days stopping up leaks and replacing pipe joints. It was wet, cold work. It could even be dangerous. A swift underground river ran through the pipeworks, and every now and then when someone fell into it and was lost. People were lost occasionally in the tunnels too if they strayed too far. Lena stared miserably down at a letter B someone had scratched into her desktop long ago. Almost anything would have been better than pipe works laborer. Greenhouse helper had been her second choice. She imagined with longing the warm air and earthy smell of the greenhouse where she could have worked with Clary, the greenhouse manager, someone she'd known all of her life. She would have been content as a doctor's assistant too, binding up cuts and bones. Even street sweeper or cart puller would have been better. At least then she could have stayed above ground, with space and people around her. She thought going down into the pipeworks must be like being buried alive. One by one, the other students chose their jobs. None of them got such a wretched, horrible, disgusting wretched job as hers. Finally, the last person rose from his chair and walked forward. It was Doone. His dark eyebrows were drawn together in a frown of concentration. His hands, Lena saw, were clenched into fists at his sides. Arthur's craft. If his hands were clenched, the Arthur could have just said he was nervous and anxious, but she didn't. She builds suspense. You know that by listening to her say his hands were clenched into fist. Doone reached into the bag and took out the last scrap of paper. He paused a minute, pressing it tightly in his hands. "Go on," said the mayor. "Read." Unfolding the paper, Doone read. "Messenger." He scowled, crumpled the paper, and dashed it on the floor. Lena gasped. The whole class rustled in surprise. Why would anybody be angry to get the job of messenger? "Bad behavior," cried the mayor. His eyes bulged and his face darkened. "Go to your seat immediately." Doone kicked the crumpled paper into a corner. Then he stalked back to his desk and flung himself down. The mayor took a short breath and blinked furiously. "Disgraceful," he said, staring at Doone. "A childish display of temper. Students should be glad to work for their city. Ember will prosper if all citizens do their best." He held up a stern finger as he said this and moved his eyes slowly from one face to another. Suddenly Doone spoke up. "But Ember is not prospering," he cried. "Everything is getting worse and worse." Prospering, developing, if it's a business, it's making money. "Silence," cried the mayor. "The blackouts," cried Doone. He jumped from his seat. "The lights go out all the time now, and the shortages of everything. If no one does anything about it, something terrible is going to happen." Lena listened with a pounding heart. What was wrong with Doone? Why was he so upset? He was taking things too seriously, as he always did. Miss Thorne strode to Doone and put a hand on his shoulder. "Sit down now," she said quietly, but Doone remained standing. The mayor glared. For a few moments he said nothing. Then he smiled, showing a neat row of gray teeth. "Miss Thorne," he said, "who might this young man be?" "I am Doone Harrow," said Doone. "I will remember you," said the mayor. He gave Doone a long look, then turned to the class and smiled his smile again. "Congratulations to you all," he said. "Welcome to Ember's workforce. Miss Thorne, class, thank you." The mayor shook hands with Miss Thorne and departed. The students gathered their coats and caps and filed out of the classroom. Lena walked down the wide hallway with Lizzie, who said, "Poor you. I thought I picked a bad one, but you got the worst. I feel lucky compared to you." Once they were out the door, Lizzie said goodbye and scurried away, as if Lena's bad luck were a disease she might catch. Okay, let's look at that last line real quick. Lizzie said goodbye and scurried away, as if Lena's bad luck were a disease she might catch. It's saying that the bad luck could be the same thing as a disease. So it's not a simile, because she's not saying that Lena's bad luck was like a disease. It said it could actually be the disease. So what kind of figurative language is that? Not a simile, but a metaphor. Very good. You're saying something is something else. The bad luck is a disease that she might catch. Lena stood on the steps for a moment and gazed across Harkin Square, where people walked briskly. How do they walk? Briskly, adverb. Bundled up cozily. How are they bundled up? Cozily, adverb. In their coats and scarves, or talked to one another in the pools of light beneath the great street lamps. A boy in a red messenger's jacket ran toward the gathering hall. On Otterville Street, a man pulled a cart filled with sacks of potatoes. And in the buildings all around the square, rows of lighted windows shone bright yellow and deep gold. Lena sighed. This was where she wanted to be. Up here where everything happened. Not down underground. Someone tapped her on the shoulder. Startled, she turned and saw Doone behind her. His thin face looked pale. "Will you trade with me?" he asked. Trade? Trade jobs. I don't want to waste my time being a messenger. I want to help save the city, not run around carrying gossip. Lena gaped at him. "You'd rather be in the pipe works?" "Electrician's helper's what I wanted," Doone said, "but Chet won't trade, of course. Pipeworks is the second best." "But why?" "Because the generator is in the pipeworks," said Doone. Lena knew about the generator, of course. In some mysterious way, it turned the running of the river water into power for the city. You could feel its deep rumble when you stood in Plumer Square. "I need to see the generator," Doone said. I have ideas about it." He thrust his hands into his pockets. "So, will you trade?" "Yes," cried Lena. "Messenger is the job I want most." And not a useless job at all, in her opinion. People couldn't be expected to trudge. There's that word trudge again. Halfway across the city every time they wanted to communicate with someone. Messengers connected everyone to everyone else. Anyway, whether it was important or not, the job of messenger just happened to be perfect for Lena. She loved to run. She could run forever. And she loved exploring every nook and cranny of the city, which was what a messenger got to do. "All right, then," said Doone. He handed her his crumpled piece of paper, which he must have retrieved from the floor. Lena reached into her pocket, pulled out her slip of paper, and handed it to him. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," said Lena. Happiness sprang up into her, and happiness always made her want to run. She took the steps 3 at a time and sped down Broad Street toward home. Okay, boys and girls, that's all of Chapter 1. So next time we'll hear Chapter 2, Message to the Mayor. There go my little pups.